There's no credible threat right now that there's a dump truck being backed up and dumping the US dollar. None.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to Retire in Texas, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Daryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Daryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of Pax Financial Group, and you're listening to Retire in Texas. Thanks for tuning in. Let me give you the disclosures that this information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific tax, investment, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com. And also, I want to remind you to text the word Texas to the number 74868. That's Texas to the number 74868. And so this particular show, I want to discuss, really, I guess the question is, the dollar dead? Are we just losing our place on the global stage to China? There's a headline in CNBC that said, the dollar seen losing global reserve status. And another headline, this was from The Economist, the disappearing dollar. How long can it remain the world's most important reserve currency? And then when we think about this, we certainly can't help but think about the end of Rome to the 5th century, Ottoman Empire, the early 1900s, and even how the UK had transitioned about World War I to America and handed them the baton. And so we ask ourselves the question, is it time for our country to fall? And we can't help but ask the question, will China replace us? So how might this all translate? Well, it looks like that China just simply wants to crash the dollar and make it completely worthless, and they will have all the power. The question is, when will they start this process of replacing our dollar? And you have to think about it in terms of groups. And one group that you might have heard of is BRICS. You might have heard on previous show, I've talked about BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. The S is South Africa. And you compare that to the G7, which is Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, and the US. And there's a significant population difference. The BRICS is about 41% of the US population, and the G7 is about 10%. The BRICS, that BRICS group also has now gotten to a point where economically they're just as powerful as the G7. So China has put together a team. Think of it like a basketball team that is now bigger, taller, and faster than our team. And they're not done recruiting. They're recruiting Egypt and Turkey and even Iran. And they've launched this financial ecosystem too. They launched, this wasn't long ago, they launched something called a new development bank. And this bank's design is to support projects all through these countries. Okay, we're going to have a common bank that can support projects through loans and guarantees. There's even some equity participation, some different financial instruments. So the idea is okay, all these groups are coming together and they want to be the new power. And if that happens, the dollar's done. Or is it? I think what we need to do is we need to look at possibilities versus probabilities. Sometimes we get those two confused. It's possible, but is it probable? I say it is possible. I say it is not probable. And let me give you reasons why. I'll give you 4 reasons why I don't have conviction that the Yuan, the Chinese currency, and the BRICS will simply destroy the dollar and we'll be left with a paper that's worthless. And I'll give you 4 reasons why. So for the first reason is for the dollar to be replaced, all of these countries that we're talking about in the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and even South Africa and the other ones, they'll have to get along. Like Texas can't even get along with California. And you're expecting all of these countries with different political, religious, cultural, and even different ways they manage the security, the troops that they have, and I'll talk about that in a second. You're expecting all of them to get along for an extended period of time. Look, it's not probable. Even with this new development bank that I just mentioned, when the Russia-Ukraine war happened, this new bank had to say, okay, we're got to put all Russia transactions on hold. Like they already ran into trouble with Russia. This new bank already had to say, look, if we don't cut ties with Russia, the global rating system called Fitch is going to downgrade us. So they already had a problem. This new bank already had a problem because one of its participants is basically insolvent now. And then you have to ask yourself the question, South Africa and America has been over there helping for years and years and years. Missionaries have, but they continue to have corruption and even rolling blackouts. And everyone knows in business that China has two sets of books. One set of books for those that are investing and another set of books that are the real books. India and China, they have conflicts. And the conflicts as recently as 2017 that still escalate in the Himalayas. There's troops that are trying to put a roadway through a kind of a rural part of the country. And these Chinese troops are trying to kind of take over the land in India. And there has been some heated tensions between China and India, and they're partnering on this bank. And you're kind of scratching your head going, wait, they have troops that are pointing guns towards each other. It's not imminent, but they're also being friendly financially. How's that going to work out? And how's Iran and Iraq? How are they going to stand by and watch? And everyone knows China has reduction camps with Muslims in them. I say re-education camps. Well, you could consider them reduction camps because they have had what has been considered birth control measures with this group of people that I believe are mostly Muslims. I'm not sure that Iraq and Iran will stand by long enough to consider that acceptable. I was also listening to a podcast the other day, and I heard of it was Voice of the Martyrs podcast, good podcast. And there was a Christian missionary there that was arrested. But when he gets arrested, he says, you don't get arrested and it's like, okay, now we're going to have a jury trial in court. He goes, no, they're enforcing the law. That's when you get arrested, they're enforcing the law. There's not a innocent until proven guilty. This is really an improbable relationship between these BRICS countries. They all have to get along politically for an extended period of time, religiously, culturally, militarily. And I know the U.S., we have our problems, but man, we work it out. Barely. Sometimes Texas wants to secede. For you to suggest that it's going to be a rapid transition, you've got to make the assumption that that's going to be stable for an extended period of time. And that's just the first point. The second point is you've also have to assume that the countries that hold the US dollar are going to take their dump truck and they're going to back it up and dump it and just drop the dollar. See, banks hold currencies for rainy days. And then what banks do is banks all around the world, they get this currency, right? And they hold on to it. And then just like any other investment portfolio, they diversify it in different currencies. And they use currencies because it's liquid. It's easy to get rid of and buy more. And it's a functional system. So if you look at those reserves at banks, you look at how much of the reserves do they hold in the United States dollar. It's not 10%, it's not 20%. It's 60% of the reserves are in US dollars. And then how much are in Chinese yuan? 2%. Now, yes, it's very likely that banks start to feel more comfortable with the Chinese yuan. But to get from 2 to 60, that's a long runway. That's a long runway. Now, China holds a lot of the U.S. debt. They hold the most next to Japan. Now, the U.S. has a lot of debt, as we know, 29 trillion. China has $1 trillion of that debt. So if China came in and said, look, we're going to back up the dump truck, we don't want it anymore, that'll crash the dollar. Does China win in that transaction? Does China win in the transaction where the dollars crash and the United States can no longer buy services and purchase products from the Chinese? That what businesses would shut down. China cannot dump the dollar. They can't because it would absolutely destroy their economy. Now they know that. And so what they're trying to do is decouple from the United States and build working relationships with other countries and increase demand domestically. They know they're too tied to the U.S. It's not lost on them. They're trying their best to build relationships with Brazil, Russia, and India and South Africa and these other countries because they know they're stuck. But there's no credible threat right now that there's a dump truck being backed up and dumping the U.S. dollar. None. In fact, when the market crashes, if you look in just recent history, 2008, 2011, when the European crisis, COVID, where did the entire world go to when things were scary? They went to the dollar. They didn't go to any other currency. So recent history tells us that there's no threat of a dollar crash. Number 3, and let me pace myself a little bit better here because I know I'm being long-winded. Number 3, innovation will drive the market, and the U.S. is the most innovative country in the world. The United States produces 25% of the world's GDP, and we only have 4% of the population. California, it's more productive than India. Texas is more productive than Brazil. A person in the United States, not defined by their purpose, which in my faith I believe everyone has a unique purpose, but in terms of their productivity and their efficiency, they're 9 times more productive in the U.S. than anywhere in the other countries. You can also measure this by patents. Patents define innovation in a lot of ways. You got to get a patent to be innovative many times. Now, China has way more patents than anybody else, 695,000 in 2021, way more. The United States only has 327,000. And you might say, whoa, wow, China's more innovative. But then when you look a little bit, you look and peel back the onion, you realize that only 10% of China's patents have any value. Many of them lapse. In fact, one Chinese patent expert called them all trash because they're playing a game over there. They're getting patents for showmanship, but they're not going anywhere. Think about the global brands. If they were going anywhere, the top global brands, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Coca-Cola, Disney, Nike, Tesla, Intel, Facebook, which one of these are Chinese companies? Innovation happens in the US, and it's unbelievable. It's because we fostered a culture of innovation and risk-taking. Give Disney as an example. Disney puts a theme park in China. Well, hey, Disney, good job taking all that risk. But to do that in China, only 43% of that theme park in China is owned by Disney. The rest is owned by the Chinese government. Well, that doesn't foster a cold risk, does it? I certainly don't think so. Okay. My last point, and I'll be quick on this one here. China's population is declining. You know, that one-child policy is hurting them. Do you know of anybody that's really immigrating to China? Yeah, I know the United States immigration system is totally messed up. But the reality is thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people are immigrating to the United States. And as a result, we're having a population explosion. Yes, it comes with issues, 100%. But we do not have a threat of population decline like China, and they know it. If they do not make material progress, their population structure will crumble beneath them. It's unbelievable. And women are saying, hey, they're trying to encourage women to have babies, and they're saying, I'm not. So I have zero reason to believe that the probability of the US dollar going away is happening. I also want to make sure you're clear here. As I express these 4 points, the 4 points is, 1, I don't think those countries are going to get along for an extended period of time. 2, I don't think anyone's backing up a dump truck to drop the dollar. 3, I think innovation leads, and we're definitely the most innovative country in the world. And 4, China has a real population decline problem. But let me tell you this too, before I close you out. Those 2 headlines I told you about, let me tell you the first one. This is from CNBC. The dollar seen losing global reserve status. Scary headline, right? That was a headline in 2011. How about this headline? How long can it remain the world's most important reserve currency? From The Economist. When was that headline? 2004. I want you to start paying attention to the details here, because 90% of the time that I hear about the dollar crashing, it is followed by a gold salesperson. It is followed by somebody who's selling gold. I've seen, I can't say all the videos because there's a ton of them, but I've YouTubed this stuff, read articles. There's certainly possibilities of the dollar losing its status, but the probabilities of it happening immediately and anytime soon is not likely. And part of this I actually like, because the United States does need to get its act together. It feels like this to me, and I'll close this out. It feels like this. It feels like if there's a house and there's a couple kids in there and the parents are alcoholics and they're fighting, and the kids are trying to tell the parents, hey, I need you to get help. I need you to get help. And the parents aren't listening to the kids. They're still alcoholics. They're still fighting. And the kids, I need you to get help. They're crying. And finally the neighbors come in and said, hey, if you don't do something, we are. That's what it feels like. It feels like everyone in the country's been saying, government, you've got to stop printing so much money. You've got to stop spending this way. You've got these green energy initiatives are not rational, and there's indirect consequences of your decisions. And I think we need to get to make some rational decisions. the government is over the last, it doesn't matter who's in office, has not really listened to the people that well. And so these other governments are saying, fine, we don't see you stewarding the dollar well. We're going to try to come up with our own mix. And because of that threat, my hope and prayer is we finally get our act together, because if we don't, then we won't have that valuable resource of the United States dollar being the currency of the world. So for that reason, I see a little bit of hope that we might get our act together. I am holding on to that hope. And I also believe that the probability isn't high. And at the end of the day, I believe in America. As you know, I mean, I own a business, have a family. I see a lot of good stuff happening as I go around the country and talk with business owners and people that have a drive and a willingness to take risks. And so if China wants to take what we've got, then I say, come and take it. Thanks for hanging in there. I hope you enjoyed this. I have a lot of confidence, and I think if you think long term, not only will you think differently, but you'll have more hope. Have a great day.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.